All right, welcome back to Replay. That was a barn, well, not really a barn burner, a nail biter last night. And joining me to break it all down is Ben Dackiw, specifically not Ravens left guard Ben Powers. But we'll take this Ben instead. Ben, how you feeling after last night's game?
I feel so much better about this team after that game. I was a wreck all Sunday night, my entire Sunday. I was a mess. I was just, when's the Ravens game going to start? When's the Ravens game going to start? When's the Ravens game going to start? And finally, it happened. We got the Bengals back in Baltimore at home. The home losing streak is over. We are back in the win column, and the Ravens are in first place in the AFC North. It's a beautiful thing, Nikhil.
Yeah, and I think I might just be a crazy person. I don't know what it was yesterday where I just the entire day the Ravens are going to win this game. The moment I realized the Ravens are going to win this game really was when Peters was active. That was the big thing for me, was whether or not Marcus Peters was going to be active, and we saw the role he played in this game. And I just felt good the whole game. Even the offense wasn't hitting. Things weren't perfect, but there was never a moment where I felt like the Ravens weren't in control of the game. Even the last drive, when they made the Chiefs march all the way down the field and take everything underneath for like 8 minutes or whatever it was. Yeah, they scored on the drive, but the Bengals do not want to score that way. The Bengals offense is not designed to succeed that way. And, in a way, forcing the Bengals to take that much time off the clock. And then the Ravens just get to control the last 2 minutes of the game. Again, just felt like the team was in control. I felt the same way against the Chiefs last year. And so this is our big question for this week. What was a bigger win for the Ravens? And again, ignore the fact that the way last year went the way it did, right? Just think about at the time, was beating the Chiefs in week 2 last year bigger, or was beating the Bengals in week 5 this year bigger?
That's tough, man. That's really tough. On the one hand, the Chiefs game, Ravens were 0-1. They were already decimated with injuries coming out of Vegas. They were staring down, as I put it in my knee-jerk reactions from that Raiders game, they're now staring down the barrel of an 0-2 start. And getting the Chiefs monkey off their back was huge. But after all the talk of how the Ravens made the wrong decision against Buffalo and how bad the defense was and just how good the defense looked against Cincinnati, the defense that just tortured them twice last year. And the fact that it's a divisional game, like this might end up mattering a lot more than the Chiefs game did down the road. So I got to give it to this game.
Yeah, I it's interesting looking back at that Chiefs game and how, just again, feels like a lot of the Ravens wins are just like a little weird. Like we won that game on a forced fumble at the end, and the 4th and 1. And while that game, it weirdly felt like there were just some individual moments of brilliance, particularly from Lamar on offense. This game really felt like a team and especially a coaching effort. And so I think that, to me, coaching is the one thing the Ravens need to solidify, because they have the talent on their roster. They just need to figure out how to maximize it against every opponent every week. And this week, Mike McDonald did his best defensive performance we've seen from this team all year. So I got to agree with you. I think this is a bigger game. I think the Chiefs game last year, again, a little marred by the way the rest of the season went. But I think there was kind of a feeling, we beat the Chiefs last year. We started to roll. I'm hoping that that's the same this year, that we kind of start to roll now. Obviously, we'll get to next week's matchup later. But looking at this Bengals game, who do you have as your Raven of the game? Who do you think was one guy who just stood out above the rest in this game?
Marcus Peters. Marlon played a fantastic, nearly flawless game, but the way Marlon has just shocked this entire team. Like they're kind of going into a funk in the second half a bit, but when he laid that hit on Tyler Boyd, and Tyler Boyd has had his moments at M&T Bank Stadium, as we all know. That was talk that was said about him after last week, myself included. I just think that was huge for him. And the way he played, Boyd and Chase were just non-factors down the stretch of that game. They didn't come alive until that final drive when Chase made that nice reception on Humphrey's shoulder. but I got to give it to Peters, and Humphrey is a very close second.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Peters. I think without Peters, I'm not sure that the Ravens defensive game plan works because they split the side. They for the most part they gave each guy half of the field. They didn't have them trail a receiver the whole game, pretty much for the most part. It happened a few times, but it was really about staying very very disciplined on defense. Peters, it's very interesting to me. Marlon's kind of known as the physical cornerback that came through today, but Peters had like maybe the most physical game I've ever seen him play. Absolute tone setter. From the very beginning was like slammed Jamar Chase into the ground very early on. The hit that you mentioned, I'm sure we're going to talk about in another minute here. I mean, I think, people were nervous about going after an extension for Peters without seeing how he's back. He's clearly back. He's clearly fully healed. He looks great. I think a couple other guys that were shouting out Queen with, I feel like a really, really calm, good game in the middle. He was key to this game plan. Again, thinking about the game plan and what was key to it. Discipline on the outside, not letting things get over the top, and over the middle, it's just making plays. He had a few missed tackles. That's going to happen quite literally every game. It is very difficult to tackle these athletes. Like, let's not freak out about it. But like his discipline, his coverage drops in the middle of the field is just really, really solid. He secured that pick. So he's probably my runner-up, but I think you're absolutely right. Marcus Peters, just vintage.
I want to say about Queen, the way he was a lot more assertive making calls and calling out running backs at Burrow's side. I haven't seen him do that a lot since he got to Baltimore. But did you notice how vocal he was being and pre-snap motions? Did you see that?
Yeah, and I think, again, he's something that ebbs and flows a little bit. I do think, there are certain offenses and types of offenses that he's probably more comfortable facing than others that are obviously easier to read. To be honest, the Bengals don't have a lot of complicated stuff in their offense. It is really a lot of, their receivers winning in their matchups and otherwise Burrow being able to pick apart zone. When he can't do that and he's got to take everything underneath, that's how a game like yesterday happens. And Queen did a really good job, I felt like, of limiting, when they passed the running back on those checkdowns, being ready for like where that running back was going to peel out. If he stays in a block, when is he going to peel out and what area is he going to go attack? And I just felt like Queen did a good job keeping a hand on that. Malik Harrison had a pretty good game too. Just really solid. Joe DeBines, I mean, just really solid linebacker play after all the questions from last week.
Malik lined up at edge a couple of times.
Yeah, and something that we've talked about a little bit is having more rotation at edge so that your guys like JPP and OA are fresher later in the game. Feel like they did that a little bit better this time. I still feel like OA and JPP were just chugging air at the end in that last drive. But JPP was an impact player for pretty much the entire game otherwise, and I think that having Harrison on the edge, for example, helps him with that. My miracle play of the week. There's a lot of there were no real take the top off the defense plays. There were there was the one pick from Patrick Queen, but that was still it was exciting because Patrick Queen caught an interception. It wasn't that spectacular of a play. So in thinking about what's the play this week, I kept going back to that Marcus Peters sack because like I said about setting the tone in the second half, especially when opponents have done a good job adjusting against the Ravens defense. That was, again, that was in the red zone. So I got to give it to actually that entire sequence, sniffing out that shovel pass. Campbell almost got a pick there. And that is just really good discipline from this defense that is still playing very aggressively, but I just feel like they're a little bit more aware of what's going on than they were last year. What you got for play of the week?
I'm going to break the rules here. I got a play of the week and I got a miracle of the week. Are you ready?
All right, I'll hear it. I like it.
Play of the week, Peters hit. Like I said, Marcus Peters, I absolutely love what he brings to the Ravens, and he needed to have a good game after what happened against the Bills. He delivered and gave us a good game, and he was all over the place, was an absolute blanket in coverage. He was great. The miracle of the week, the fact that we're not losing Marcus Williams for the rest of the season, probably.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a huge one. Even more, I mean, that's part of the reason why they were able to move the ball a little better at the end of the game. Stone played fine, but again, he's not Marcus Peters. They're going to need Hamilton. I I am curious what their concern with Hamilton is. I feel like he's playing really well, but they seem to be kind of wanting to ease him in and keep him in kind of this playmaking specific role. And they're gonna have a week of practice, and I think that's gonna more determine what his role is going forward. I know Harbaugh kind of seemed to indicate it was going to be Geno and Kyle Hamilton, but dude's the 14th overall pick. And he knows what he's doing. He is good, and so I think that unless there's an issue with his fit in McDonald's defense or something, which I don't think there should be, I got to imagine that he's going to get a lot more playing time. We're going to see what we really have in him. Potentially is kind of that deep safety too. So
I think within Hamilton's case, I think we've seen how difficult this scheme is to pick up. The rookie cornerbacks that the Ravens picked up, a lot of them have had a hard time in coverage. We saw that with the breakdowns against Miami. We saw that with the breakdowns against New England and in Buffalo. So I think it's a big ask what Hamilton has been doing. So I do think they have been easing him in slowly. But I think that we are going to learn very quickly just how good he is. And if he can assert that he should have this safety spot above Geno Stone, I think that's going to be very interesting to watch as the weeks unfold without Marcus Williams. I would like to have one free agent signing not get hurt. Just one. Can we have one? Like,
yeah,
come on.
it's it's like, okay, yeah, okay, if Calais Campbell or someone were to go down with injury like this, you'd be really upset too. But it is a little bit like, man, he's playing all pro level. You just signed him for all this money. Pierce just went down. Can't catch a break. The D line is missing Pierce, you can tell, and just can't catch a break. So I think you're right that it's a miracle that he's not out for the season. That's
Fire Steve Saunders. That's what it's all Steve Saunders' fault,
yeah,
Nikhil.
yeah.
It's all Steve Saunders' fault.
It is all one man.
He
So
would have a better trainer would have stopped Marcus Williams from dislocating his wrist.
Yeah, and he tried to actually play through until they realized at the half how bad it was, and so just one of those things where you're kind of impressed with the defense performance in the second half. Again, you think about how crucial the entire game plan was and their communication, passing players through zones. Williams is key in that, right? He is the one playing center field back there for the most part, and to lose him in the second half and to be able to hang on the way they did and not collapse on defense, it's huge for them to not collapse on defense after losing Marcus Williams, right? If it was just, Williams was in the game and they didn't collapse on defense, I wouldn't be that excited about it. But they're losing maybe them like, I don't know, he's playing like, I don't know, their second or third best defender right now. He's playing great. And so, you're right that it's a miracle that he's not out for longer, and we'll have to hope. I think it's, again, one of those situations where you just want to make sure you get him back healthy for that playoff push and for the playoffs themselves. You're not trying to rush him back this month or early November. I think it'll be certainly mid to late November that he returns to practice, and soon after he's able to return to practice, I think he'll play. But again, they're going to be cautious. They're going to be overly cautious with him, like they were with Stanley and like they still are with Dobbins. And so, they're going to have to. I can't see a situation in which Hamilton doesn't really step up here. I think Geno Stone's like a quality third safety on most teams in the NFL, but in terms of developing Hamilton, you just at a certain point you're going to have to get him out there.
They still have our Darius Washington on the practice squad as well, so we could see him get activated next week.
Yeah, that's a good point. We could even see, I wouldn't even shock me if Brandon Stevens were to just play a little bit of safety, or just they rotate around and disguise coverages a little more just because they know he's got that in his bag. But that also brings up, okay, Pepe Williams is going to play. They're already comfortable with Pepe Williams playing more as the third cornerback. Armour Davis was a healthy scratch because they wanted Worley and Seymour for special teams. It's gonna have to shift everything around again, and thankfully it's still Peters and Humphrey on the outside, and they can really just rely on that in terms of keeping other teams' outside receivers at least limited, because both have just been playing out of their minds. One guy who's not playing out of his mind, and usually is Lamar Jackson. It pains me as someone who just like wants to see Greg Roman do what he does best more instead of doing what he does mediocre. What he does mediocre is running the ball into like between the tackles. Like he's really not that great calling run plays between the tackles unless it involves Lamar. He's also, to me, not that great on play design that have multiple deep shots in them. His best play designs come when there is a guy getting deep who is schemed to be in a one-on-one matchup, if not wide open. And he did that so well last night. There were at least 2 times, one with Duvernay and one with Wallace, that Roman had schemed him wide open. Both the receivers executed their routes perfectly. No person within 5 to 10 yards, and Jackson just misses them. And that just can't happen. It just can't. To me, there's nothing else to say about that. We know he can hit those passes. Roman had such a good game yesterday, and we don't really get to talk about it that much because Lamar couldn't connect on those passes that should be the highlight explosive plays of this offense. I don't know what else there is to say about he's just got to hit those.
I think Lamar, we've come a long way. When Lamar was a rookie, his bad games were really bad games, and a bad game here was not catastrophic. You know what I mean? But Lamar needs to. We already know he needs to hit those passes, but at least he's not overthrowing 5 yard out routes or anything like that. It's not quite. But you're right. When a receiver is that wide open down the field, he needs to hit those. And something that has bothered me about Lamar, whenever these primetime games, I'm not saying he's not clutch. I'm not saying he can't. I'm not saying that he's not a great football player, because he is a great football player. Let me just put that out there before I start this. In the Chiefs game last year, which was also Sunday Night Football, and in this game, which again was Sunday Night Football, he comes out too frantic. He doesn't make decisions as quickly. His throws aren't as crisp. And those 2 misses on Duvernay and Wallace, those were bad, especially the Wallace one. They were bad. He needs to, I don't know what it is, but on primetime matchups, he does not come out good. It always takes him a quarter or 2 to settle in.
Yeah, and he always, he seems to do better later. He doesn't have an issue in those late game situations, just, getting it done, right? He did that on the last drive. But yeah, it's one of those things where you just, he can do it and he's got to do it. He wants the big fat contract. I still think he deserves it. He deserves a lot of money. But it's just, God, man, no Bateman. Roman does a great job with this game plan to adjust him for not having his best wide receiver. And
the receivers were getting open.
Yeah. And, Jackson was, hitting Andrews like normal. Felt like he was pretty good with, his intermediate throws. I loved that when he was running and he was getting chased by Bengals defenders, he was gunning it out of bounds. He was not gunning it up randomly towards any black jersey he saw. He was getting that out of bounds once he was out of the pocket. That's how, to me, that's how a good amount of his interceptions happen, is he's trying to make something happen. He sees a guy and he just launches a ball. And this time I felt like he knew there was nothing. He got rid of it. Good discipline. But the deep balls, when those chances are there, there's no other way. We've said it enough. You just got to hit them.
And one more thing about Lamar, and then we can move on. I 100% believe that he is worth the money that he is asking for. It's just the going rate of a franchise quarterback. But Lamar Jackson is a big reason why the Ravens didn't absolutely bury the Bengals in the first half. This game should not have been tied going into halftime. The Ravens should have been up by a few scores heading into the locker room at halftime.
Yeah, especially with the way this defense was playing, just stuffing everything the Bengals are throwing at them, not letting them get deep. And it was, to me, I think everything went to plan pretty much the entire game, except for a couple of those, deep throws that Lamar takes down the field. And that changes this game to a, 30-17 type victory, in which case you're really feeling good. You feel like you've really beaten the Bengals and you're really asserting your dominance on the division. Still an important win, still got the division lead, but not the kind of game you win in January, to me, if Lamar plays like that. So I think he'll do it. I think he'll be just fine. Moving on, welcome to the Flock Award. we talked a lot about we talked a good amount about Marcus Williams. So we don't need to go over him again. I think there's one pretty clear winner here. Who do you got?
Um, I mean, I kind of wasted it earlier. I was just gonna say Marcus Williams again, just because he's been that good since he's got here. And again, the Ravens are just so lucky that the injury isn't for the rest of the year.
Yeah, so I think the instant impact of JPP in this game is just like he's clearly fully healed from his injury. He doesn't look like he did last year. He's disruptive. And I just think, everyone had been screaming for them to sign him. Maybe it was those extra injuries that motivated them to pony up, those incentives that he wanted in his contract. Maybe he just needed the time to get all the way into shape and recover from his injury. But whatever it was, perfect landing spot. And then you think about, God, I'm knocking on wood here, because if this linebacking group can stay healthy,
Don't say it. Damn it.
if they can stay healthy,
Why would you say that, Nikhil?
because superstition doesn't exist. I you know how people are like, oh, you got to wash your jersey after a loss. I didn't wash my jersey after last game, even though I wore it, and I wore it to this game, and then they won. Superstition isn't real, but I'll still not.
If he gets hurt next game, I'm going to be very upset.
I mean, go for it. But look, you've got Odafe Owe, you've got Justin Houston, who's, they're being cautious with him again. They're being cautious with him because they like what they've gotten out of JPP. Then you got JPP. Then you got Bowser. Then you got Ajabo. Bowser's going to help out Queen and Harrison and Bynes as, that pass coverage over the middle linebackers on passing downs. Mike McDonald's just going to be have rotations galore, have dudes so fresh. And I think that is really what gets exciting about this defense down the stretches is their potential to just have more depth up front, because they're getting gashed in the run game, and that's not normal for them. They're not able to set as hard edges as they're used to. And, the potential of this edge group to actually be something special by the end of the season is actually pretty cool, considering how weak it was coming in. And the fact that, Owe was held pretty quiet last night, but has generally looked pretty good. Again, second year raw player getting there.
Owe was getting mugged again last night. He was getting held all game. That was ridiculous.
He's getting mugged, and I don't know why the Ravens aren't, making a stink or having the NFL just tell the refs to look closely, because it's getting like the arm across the neck and stuff that he's getting when he beats guys. But, I think that it's an exciting edge group, and the JPP signing was just perfect injection into the defense right before these two big games. Good move. I hope that we have a better welcome to the flock award within the next 3 or 4 weeks for Moore, Burns, Panthers fire sale, something like that. But I'm hoping, but the JPP signing is just like, oh God, we have competent edge play, a guy that we're comfortable being out there, a third guy behind Houston and Owe we're comfortable being out there that we just didn't have before. So I think that's huge. So huge credit to him. Breakout of the week. I felt like this would be a good place to talk about Devin Duvernay, because I didn't feel like there was any player who really broke out in a way this week. Even Duvernay, it felt like did not break out in any huge way this week. I just think it was more Greg Roman gave us a peek into the vault a little bit. Duvernay really responded by just playing really well. That toss, he's finding the lanes. I think it was Matt Waldman, I think is his name on Twitter, who was talking about how that toss play, for example, gives Duvernay the ability to navigate like a returner, which is what he's really good at. He picked up that fumble and that botched snap and ran it for a first down. I mean, that is just good situational awareness football. And then there's all the receiver stuff he's doing that's great. He's executing his routes perfectly. You just love what you're seeing out of him.
I'm not going to say he's Deebo Samuel. I would never say such a thing. But using him in the running game and the passing game gives the Ravens so much to work with. When Bateman does come back and secondaries are actually being honest and making an honest effort to stop the pass, Duvernay is going to be so dangerous out of the backfield. It's going to be so good once we get everyone back at full strength.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting about Duvernay, coming out of college, he's known as a return guy, really good runner, yak. Is pretty okay at the catch point, pretty good at getting separation, but it was really he's a great runner. he's really improved, like, just catching the ball. Like, he just has really, really good hands. It just seems like his rapport with Jackson has developed significantly. He's really comfortable throwing in the ball, and I don't think he's had a single, I'm sure he has, but that I can remember specifically, there hasn't been a play this season where I'm like, Duvernay messed that up. Huge, huge third-year leap from him, and you got to give the Ravens credit for having patience and for letting him develop the last 2 years, using his skills as a returner, and kind of surprising other teams with him this year. Really, really coming out and saying we didn't want any of the guys on the market. We still don't want a Will Fuller. It's Devin Duvernay as our wide receiver too, and he's going to show you why. And I think he really has. Head scratcher of the week. I felt like this was, I don't know, pretty poorly refereed game. I don't know. I think the quality of officiating is just feels like it's gone down this year. I don't know, every offseason they issue different points of emphasis and things like that. And it just seems like they get it wrong. They overemphasize things every single year. And so, we can go back and forth. The face mask that was at the very early in the game, they held Dobbins on a screen. There was even a defensive pass interference called against Marcus Peters, who's covering Jamar Chase, that their feet got tangled up. If you want to call that holding for the contact before the throw, that's fine. But their feet got tangled up while the ball's in the air, and it's just not defensive pass interference. I'm sure there are plays the other way that the Ravens got that against the Bengals that the refs missed. Also bad. Like it's just so tiring when human error plays such a huge role in these games, and it feels so obvious when you see a face mask on a replay and you're like, how are they not seeing these things? There's like 5 of them watching the same part of the play.
I don't know what it is that NFL officials have, if it's just their union being stubborn and changes, because they hated it when pass interference became a reviewable play. They hated it, and it only lasted a year. They refused to allow a sky judge to be added, which we've seen works. We have seen the sky judge work in other football leagues, and I don't understand why they don't do it here. And it's the spotting the football in 2022. It's stupid. It's just stupid. Let's call it what it is. The chain gangs have absolutely no business being on a football field in this age. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it just takes away from the product. It just takes away from the product what they're presenting. You talk about other calls in other games, the roughing the passer they called against the Falcons, right? You're kind of taking away a really exciting end of that game and just letting the Bucs run it out, and it just doesn't feel like there's consistency. It doesn't feel like there's consistency across crews either, and I think that's the thing that's also frustrating is there's kind of this third element of the game. It's somewhat similar to baseball when it comes to umpires having different strike zones, but even then it's a lot. I feel like even then it's more consistent crew to crew in baseball than it is in football. What you're expecting to call, you're still kind of expecting pitches around the strike zone to be pitches in the strike zone to be strikes and outside to be balls. And most of the time, it's not like there's a drastically different strike zone by an umpire. In football, it just feels like there's this third part of the game that we never really talk about. Fans don't really get to know much about it. There's no way to really prepare for it. And you just kind of have to see what happens on game day. And I don't think it needs to be this way. I'm not sure exactly what the solution is, but I'm certain that there's some kind of way to have ref accountability. I also think it's okay for them to admit that they got calls wrong. I think that's maybe the NFL is worried about teams or being like, oh, the refs are admitting they got calls wrong, so the game should be different. Well, no, that's just part of the game. But I do think some kind of review or accountability process would be nice.
I agree.
Moving on to our last award, Unsung Hero of the Ravens this week. I think I'm just riding for Josh Oliver this season because the man is playing incredible, tight end Ravens football. He's doing all the dirty work they're asking him. He played 23 snaps. He ran out to catch a pass on 7 of them as a tight end. The rest of them, he was a blocker, and most of the time he was a run blocker. He's kind of filled Nick Boyle's role with Nick Boyle just not really being Nick Boyle anymore. Josh Oliver came to Baltimore and is just learning how to become a great blocking tight end. It's just great to see a guy who was billed as a speedy vertical threat tight end coming out of college, a third round pick, gets traded for a conditional seventh, and kind of reinvents himself.
We need to put out an APB on Nick Boyle because I am starting to wonder where he is. Genuinely, I miss him. I miss him.
Yeah, I don't know
But
if it's a health thing. I don't know if they're not seeing what they want out of him in practice. If they just feel
he
like he's
was active, wasn't he?
yeah, if they feel like he's not adding enough in the passing game to even have him on the field, that he makes the offense too predictable and one dimensional. I don't know. But these are all questions for a guy who's, getting paid, as much money as the Ravens committed to him. Again, they committed to him before the injury. So there's, they didn't see this coming, but, you know, it makes you wonder. Again, Oliver is mostly a blocker, but he's pass and run blocking. I don't know. Let's see how many. I'm looking now. How many snaps? I don't think Nick Boyle played a snap on offense. Come to think of
I
it,
didn't see him.
and so it's a concern. It's a concern to think about injury. Again, he's had a really long road back. He's had multiple surgeries. Nothing against him, to fault him if at this point he just can't go. And the Ravens aren't making that move, maybe for cap purposes. I'm not really sure, but. It's tough, but the silver lining is Josh Oliver has just grown immensely since coming here. I can't say enough about, and I'm sure I'd love to hear about from the coaching staff what they think of his development, because it just feels like he came and really embraced what this offense is about, what tight ends are asked to do in this offense, and is just doing it at a pretty high level for a guy who's really not supposed to be, like I said, third round speedy tight end guy is not supposed to be a great run blocker on one of the best rushing offenses in the league, but he is. It's working. And, we all wonder why he made the roster. This is why. He's playing great. So not getting credit for it, which is why I'm shouting him out here.
I got three guys I want to shout out. Patrick Makari. He is Falele played good. Makari was very good against Cincinnati. It's unbelievable the things that he continues to do as basically a plug and play anywhere on the offensive line. It's great. And I didn't love the rotation idea. Our friend of the show, Cole Jackson, didn't like it either. That's hard to do for offensive linemen. But he did get 2/3 of the snaps all game. He was very good. Stanley looked very good. I loved what I saw out of Stanley, so it'll be nice to see him get some more action maybe next week. Dobbins, I understand that he's frustrated with his usage. The knee doesn't seem to be bothering him at all, but I understand why he's frustrated. I understand why the Ravens are being careful with him. But he needs to be patient. His time is coming very, very soon here. Maybe even next week. Who knows? But my unsung hero of the week.
We want to keep you fresh so that when these games really, really matter, you can be the guy every down when it really, really matters. And we don't, they experienced this last year. They went through it with Boyle, they went through it with Stanley, and they're just not going to let it happen. And right. Dobbins has clearly he's been on a roller coaster ride this last year. It's been tough for him trying to get in shape. I'm sure, I know for a fact he felt like he was ready to play before the team was. He still feels like he's further along than the team thinks he is. That 100% number, he thinks he's reached it. I'm not sure that you can reach 100%, the same 100% again after the kind of injury he had. Not, doesn't mean he's not still a great running back, but I think the Ravens are just being a little bit more honest with themselves and with Dobbins about how these injuries work and how they affect long-term. I think he'll be fine. I know he's upset. It happens.
Let me give out my actual award. I was just shouting out those two, Nikhil. I got one. I got the big fella. I'm repping his merch. Patrick Ricard is the unsung hero of the week. The official Project Pat himself.
This is.
I don't buy merch.
Podcast. This is the official podcast of the Wild Pat.
The Wild Pat offense,
and
he's just so good. He can block anywhere. He can block in the backfield. He can block as a tight end. Lamar Jackson misses 5 games because of a bone bruise. The Ravens lock up his All-Pro fullback to help protect him.
Basically, personal protector. I mean, that's what he does. He's
a bodyguard. He's just a great blocker. He
Yeah.
can pick up blitzes. He can block as a tight end. He can block in the backfield as a on. I'd like to see more of him as a pass blocking in the backfield on third down. Actually, we didn't see a lot of that last week, but he's just so good. He's so
Yeah.
good. He's such a good blocker.
Yeah, I don't think the Ravens got in too many obvious passing situations, and that's really the only time you can pull that kind of thing out when everyone in the world knows that you're going to be passing the ball. That's really the only time you can have him come in there and be that personal protector. But like you say, there isn't a block he can't take on. You feel like they do a good job protecting the tackles with him, because he just is so good at knowing how to get leverage on whoever he's facing. He's got the size, he's got the power, obviously, but I also think he's really smart about how he seals his blocks and what angles he chooses. Again, when the Ravens signed him, they were like, "Oh, why did they sign Ricard, a fullback? All this money, there's wide receivers." This is why there's no one in the league who really does what he does. Juszczyk's more of a utility kind of fullback. Great, Pro Bowler, fantastic, but there's no one in the league who does what Ricard does. And in this offense, especially without Boyle, you really need that. Looking ahead to next week, the 4-1 New York Football Giants, hell of a team right now. Brian Daboll is the runaway coach of the year favorite for me because he's just getting every bit of juice out of that offense, out of and the defense. But the big thing is he's letting the team kind of develop as it goes. It's kind of interesting to watch. I had a couple notes here just about the things the Giants do. One, letting Greg Roman take a crack at Wink Martindale's defense, Wink obviously knows Lamar really well. Lamar ran practices against those defenses for several years, or not several years, I guess a few years. The Ravens can't stop the run too well, and that's what the Giants are been really good at with Saquon Barkley this year. And as we talked about, the J.K. Ronnie Stanley usage, does a rotation continue? I felt like Stanley played well enough, certainly to merit him being the starter still, to return to starting, but it really just depends on the snap count. And that's really going to tell us, again, does Dobbins still have a snap count? Are they still limiting him? Those are some of the things I'm curious about for next week. What about you?
I think the chess match between Wink and Roman is going to be so much fun. I think they were in the same building. I think Roman was brought in, I think in 2018, Lamar's rookie year, maybe 2017. Wink has been here for so long and Roman has been here for so long. They were in the same building for so long. They know each other so well. The chess match between the Baltimore offense and the New York defense is just going to be so much fun. People are going to say, "Oh, Wink knows Greg Roman's offense so well." That's a double-edged sword. It's going to be, they both know each other so well, and I hope the tackles on the offensive line better be ready to go because those edge rushers are coming.
Yeah. And they've got one of the best left tackles in the game right now, in Andrew Thomas. So that's going to be a fun matchup. Not having really great receivers is going to be interesting to see how they try and scheme things open. I'm expecting a lot of man from the Ravens, just under the belief that they can lock down the Giants receivers and not give them the opportunity for busted zone coverages and things like that. But this chess match, I think, is going to be really interesting. Roman combating the blitz, Martindale, adjusting, dealing with Lamar, knowing exactly what Lamar can do is a blessing and a curse, because it makes you want to game plan specific things for him. But at the same time, the problem with Lamar is he can do anything at any given moment to a certain extent. So
I think Roman has adapted his scheme more than Wink has in the past year because Roman, he's just doing things that we didn't see from this offense before. They're being more reliant on the pass, which is something a lot of people have been hammering on for years. And with Dobbins being such a question mark, I don't think Wink's going to know exactly who to game plan for in the running game. And the running game, by the way, it's looking better by the game. It looks so much better against Cincinnati.
yeah, I mean, Kenyon Drake was getting some gash plays in there. He looks comfortable in this offense now. Didn't feel like we were missing Justice Hill, which I was a little worried about not having that juice from him. But, again, nothing crazy great from Drake. Mike Davis did okay, nothing crazy great from him. He only had a couple snaps. Dobbins, I think, forced a bunch of missed tackles, was doing his thing. And at the end of the day, it's Lamar. Lamar's your best runner. Lamar's your best player. And so that game came down to his ability to run the ball, and that's maybe the thing on this team that you can trust the most at any given moment is Lamar Jackson running the ball. So curious to see how he does, what Wink does to contain that next week, in terms of pass rush scan, if his blitzes are more or less aggressive. So I think we're going to be looking for Houston and Bateman to be back. I think it's going to be a good game, definitely closer than we were expecting coming into the season, but still feeling good about the Ravens. Kind of reminding everyone the Giants roster isn't necessarily talented enough to sustain this level of play.
I think getting the Giants are hot, and I love the hire that I love the job Brian Dable has done. I think he's the hire of the offseason. He might have single-handedly saved Daniel Jones's tenure in New York, but I'm glad the Ravens are getting them after they're coming back from London, because maybe they'll be a bit worn down. I don't love playing at MetLife Field again. I hate that stadium with all of my soul. But I think it's going to be a really good game. And one more thing in this segment, the Panthers firing Matt Rule has opened up so many possibilities, not just for the Ravens, but across the league. The Panthers have so many guys that are just easy pickings right now for general managers. We're not getting Christian McCaffrey. I would love it. I would love it in this offense, but it's not going to happen.
Money contract for running back. Gross.
But if we could get DJ Moore, could you imagine?
Moore's the big swing. Burns is the even bigger one because that comes with an extension. I don't see Burns happening because I just think they like what they have at edge in general. I think Moore is if Moore turns into a bidding war, they're not there for it. I think then they go for Robbie Anderson further down their depth chart to just grab a guy that honestly seems to kind of have somewhat of a relationship with Lamar based on some of their social media interaction, and just wouldn't hate that either. But if I can out on this first for Moore, I do it.
I'm a Robbie Anderson fan. I like the guy. He's fine. DJ Moore, Maryland guy. He a Terp. It's time to bring him home. It is time to bring him home. I believe in the Ravens method. Ozzie did it. EDC's doing it, of stockpiling draft picks and safeguarding these early round picks. You rarely see the Ravens trade either a first or a second. But sometimes you got to get sexy. I think DJ Moore giving that the receiving core suddenly becomes a three-headed dragon of Bateman, Duvernay, and then Moore. That opens things up for Bateman. It opens things up for Duvernay. And we don't know what this team is going to look like post Lamar contract or post, God forbid, Lamar trade. Mm-hmm. The time is now to get sexy on a trade.
Yeah. And I think that I agree. I think Moore's that guy. I just hope it doesn't turn into a bidding war with the Rams, for example.
I don't think the Rams are looking for receiver help. They need so much more other than another receiver.
True that. But again, it's still the Rams, so they might just see a Pro Bowl caliber player on the market and go get him.
What picks do they have left to trade at this point?
They'll figure it out. I mean, they'll go into they'll trade as many picks as they need to, clearly. But yeah, I think Moore is. I'm normally pretty dead set against giving up a first rounder. I think Moore is worth it,
especially with the extension he just signed. The first would 100% be worth it.
He's on a decent contract. I'm 100% certain the Ravens have made the call and are talking about it, are working on it. They're also not going to rush it just because Rule was fired. The Panthers aren't just going to do a fire sale right away, right? There's still plenty of season left. And if any chance you have to up some of these guys' value, you're going to take. But I absolutely agree. Time to bring DJ Moore home. And yeah, I think that's the thing I'm probably looking for the Ravens to do before the deadline. DJ Moore is the top of the list. All right, Ben, thanks so much for joining us as always. This was a good win. Not the most dominating one the Ravens have had. I think we're still sniffing around for that kind of knockout blow kind of win. But
if it ain't pretty, it ain't the Ravens.
What?
If it ain't ugly, it ain't the Ravens.
Yeah, and that's very true. And as always, we didn't even say the words Justin Tucker on this podcast, which is actually a little crazy for us to have accidentally done that. But
I love Justin Tucker. There, we said it.
Yeah, we love you, Justin. You're the GOAT. You are maybe the best team sport athlete at doing his job in the history of sports.
Correct.
Maybe Mariano Rivera is the only other one that you can put in that same echelon, and that is a crazy, unique category to be in. So Thanks so much for everyone for listening, and thanks, Ben, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.